Hi everyone, it's Tonya Gibbs, and today I want to share with you a Christmas card process video featuring products from Die-Namite Dies. We're going to use the pine wreath die and the poinsettia branch die today. I will put links to the store and to the blog down below where you can purchase these. This is part of the December 2014 Sketch and Dare Challenge. This month's dare is to use something metallic, and that is the glimpse of the sketch. The sketch has been kept really simple this month because when you create Christmas cards, you really want something that's simple. However, in true Tonya fashion, I had to make it completely difficult. I created a template here to draw out a circle. This is going to be my guide for stamping along. The circle is approximately 3 inches wide, but you can use whatever you have to create the dimensions because truthfully you're not going to see it once it's done. It's just there to help me keep a visual reference as I'm stamping along the curve here. So I'm using a stamp from Viva Las Vegas. This is a very small pine stamp, and I like to purchase small stamps because when you repeat the pattern they make a really nice dynamic effect. What I'm doing is I'm taking a Prima chalk and I am just following the guide of that circle. I'm having a first generation stamp and then a second generation. And notice that I'm alternating. When I do a first generation, it's always over the second generation side, and vice versa, so that I get a really nice full wreath, but it has some variation in color, so it has a lot of depth to it. Truthfully, the wreath by itself is very beautiful, but let's add a little bit more character to it. So now I've taken the pine wreath die and I'm adding glue to my birds. Some of my pond fronds are going to stand up, and that's perfectly fine. That gives even more depth, but I do want to make sure my birds are very secure on my card front. So I'm going to just go back with my Tombow Mono adhesive to add that. I really love to use this adhesive because it helps to hold things down. It dries super fast. Now for the second layer, I wanted my birds to have a more tan color to them, not green, because I've never seen a green bird. Anyway, so I find it easier when I'm going to replace some of these negative spaces to just leave the die in the die cuts in the die and then remove them as I need them. And I'm using my cutter bee tweezers to remove those little teeny itty bitty details that are hard to pick up with your fingers. And notice that I'm adding the mono to the birds individually, and I'm using those tweezers to put those little teeny tiny pieces down. You want to make sure you work kind of slow and pay attention to all these little pieces that could get overlooked because it's so easy to drop them and then they just really don't look like much of anything laying on your desk. So piecing this all back together is somewhat of a challenge, so I just encourage you to go ahead and make sure that you keep everything in that die as much as possible. And don't forget the pieces, the negative pieces that you cut out from the scrap paper. You need to keep those as well because some of these details are found there, not inside the die. So once I get all of my layers back on my birds, I'm tapping them down really good with those tweezers to make sure that they are in fact in the right place and secured. I want them to make sure that they stay down. Now the tail of this bird is actually not glued down, but that's okay because it gives it a little bit more depth as long as the base of it is. So I'm just taking some plain black acrylic paint and putting it on my stamping block there, and I'm adding some white paint to it to tone it down to make it more of a soft gray. And when I put it onto the bird, I realized that it was actually a little too dark, so I added water to it, and notice that I oversprayed the water over on my card. So don't do that next to your card. That's a tip. Unless you just want black splatters on your card, which is totally doable. So anyway, paint all of the top portions of the birds. I left the breasts that tan color. I go back and add color all over the entire bird before long, but just try to keep some areas where you don't cover it completely because that's what's going to give it a lot of depth and make your birds have a little more dimension to them. and give them a more real life appearance. Now these birds are very dark here, and this paint does dry a little bit lighter, but what I decided to do was take a little bit of this kind of creamy beige color acrylic paint and just paint over the black. You do want the black to completely dry before you do that. And then I'm taking my finger and I'm rubbing that paint into these birds to give them just to kind of work the two colors together to eliminate some of this high contrast. I wanted them to blend a little better. So just keep applying paint until you get the right coloring that you're after. So once my birds are completely dry, I decided to go ahead and create my poinsettias, and this is from the poinsettia branch die. All I did was I cut the die out in red cardstock, and then I removed all of the poinsettias, and I cut it two times. The first time, the first layer, I'm going to do 2 layers for each poinsettia, and what I'm doing is pinching each one of the leaves, and then I'm going to layer them one on top of the other and alternate them a little so that they're offset and the flower has a little bit more dimension. By pinching these leaves, you're giving a little bit of depth as well to the flower and making it look a little bit more realistic. So I did this for 3 flowers, and now I'm taking my dimensional paints and I'm just adding some to the center. I used the yellow in the center of the poinsettias, and then I'm going to use red to cover up the berries that are on the pine wreath die cut. And then right in the center where the die didn't quite touch because I made the circle too big, I went ahead and added some more dots, and then I used a black dimensional paint on the eyes of all of the birds. Now I'm going to use my embossing buddy and then I'm going to stamp this Merry Christmas. So for the metallic portion of the challenge, I'm adding the word Merry Christmas with silver embossing powder, and it has a really nice foil finish to it once it's heat set. You'll see it in just a moment. I love this card. It's so beautiful. But it still needs a touch of something. So I grabbed out some white puffy paint, and I'm going to add it to the top of all of the areas of the die where if snow were falling, it would fall and land on the top portions. So I'm adding it to all of those top layers. I don't want to add it to the whole thing because I still want to see all the color from below. So just make sure you think about it when you start adding this white, and you only add it to the things that would be dimensionally high, because that's where snow will collect. So once all of it is dry completely, then our card is finished, and here's a close-up view of what it looks like after we completed it. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a chance to participate in the challenge. You have until December the 31st to submit your project, so you have plenty of time. The sketch is super simple this month. And once again, I will put a link to all of the dies and the blog post and all the details of where to link up your blog. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and share it with a friend.